"Get out! We don't serve you here," Brian Walker said, his voice firm and dripping with mockery. His words echoed through the quiet lobby of the bank branch, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. He didn't even bother to look at her, as if Ariana's presence somehow tainted the elegance of the place. Ariana stood there, feeling as though she had been ripped from the very world she had spent her life building. A world where every brick, every signature, every contract, every figure bore her mark. And yet, in this moment, with just one sentence, Brian had turned her into an outsider, a stranger, someone unworthy of service. But Brian wasn't done. He tilted his head, lowering his voice just enough so that only Ariana and a few nearby employees could hear. "Maybe you should consider a branch that's more appropriate for cases like yours, or somewhere with staff who are more accommodating to special situations." A young employee nearby flinched, but didn't dare lift her head. Her gaze was torn between wanting to speak up and the fear of the branch manager's authority. Ariana could feel the shift in the room. The customers nearby started casting glances at her. An elderly couple whispered to each other, then looked away. A young man in business attire clicked his tongue, visibly annoyed, as if her presence was delaying his day. Brian crossed his arms, a thin smirk appearing on his face, and signaled to the teller to continue serving the next customer, as if Ariana no longer existed in his world. "Then why do I see other transactions going through just fine?" Ariana's voice rang out. Not loud, not sharp, but cold enough to make a few heads turn again. A voice that anyone who had ever faced her in billion-dollar deals would never forget that tone of terrifying calm, the sign of a storm silently building beneath the surface. Brian kept his composure, never looking at her again. He spoke to the staff while keeping his eyes on his computer screen. "The system's complicated. Not all transactions are the same. We serve according to priority. I'm sure she understands that." Ariana looked around at the faces avoiding her gaze, at the eyes pretending not to see, at the bowed heads as if they feared the truth would strike them if they dared witness it. Brian took a step closer, his voice low but clear enough for her to hear. "Here. We follow procedures. Procedures people like you sometimes forget they need to respect." Each word "people like you" landed heavy as lead, crushing against Ariana's pride. This wasn't just a petty power play. This was deliberate humiliation, a direct strike against everything she represented. A customer behind her cleared his throat impatiently. Another muttered under his breath, "If she's not doing any business, let someone else through already." Ariana drew in a deep breath, standing tall as she always had. Every passing second was a beat of rising resolve inside her. She knew that reacting now would only let them paint her as the troublemaker. No. She had come too far to fall into such a small trap. She turned, each step weighted but steady, when her hand reached the glass door. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. She paused, not out of curiosity, but because deep down she knew this was the start of a new chapter. She pulled out her phone. The screen lit up with a message from a number she recognized, the legal team of her corporation. "We've received the report from the branch office. Call when ready. All related records have been extracted and securely archived." Ariana allowed herself a slight smile, not of satisfaction, but of someone who had finally seen the path through the fog. She pushed open the door, the cold breeze sweeping away the humiliation of moments ago. On the sidewalk, her footsteps rang out firm and clear. She didn't look back at Brian. She didn't need to. She knew that the next time she returned, she wouldn't be entering through the front door. She would walk into the executive boardroom, and Brian would have no choice but to bow his head. Not in greeting, but in begging for forgiveness. Ariana stepped out of the bank branch, but not to leave. She stood in the quiet of the morning, lifting her gaze to the towering buildings around her. New York City kept up its relentless pace, but for her, in that moment, the world felt as if it had paused. What had just happened wasn't just a simple denial. It was a declaration of war. She couldn't let this act of discrimination end with a blocked withdrawal. This wasn't just about a halted transaction. It was about everything she and people like her had endured for far too long. Discrimination never truly stops. It hides in polite refusals, in condescending looks, in decisions made about you without ever asking your voice. "Not today," she whispered, her voice cold. "Not anymore." Ariana turned back toward her car, but instead of getting in and driving away, she paused for a moment. The phone in her hand seemed to carry a strange pull, as if it refused to let her leave just yet. Without thinking twice, she tapped a contact, her fingers moving purposefully, landing on the name of the one person she had decided to trust in this fight. "Where do we begin?" she asked, her voice steady with resolve. A deep, calm voice answered from the other end of the line. "We're going to show them what they never wanted to see." She said nothing more, simply nodded. Though no one could see her, Ariana was ready. She would no longer let her life be shaped by those who looked down on her. She would prove to everyone that although Brian and people like him might believe they held all the power, they could never stop the change she was about to bring. Back inside the branch, Brian still sat at his desk, basking in what he thought was his victory for the day. He had no idea that the comfort he felt was already crumbling beneath him. He assumed that Ariana, like so many before her, would simply walk away, accepting the discrimination without protest, but he was wrong. Ariana Cole was not someone easily defeated. She returned to her office, her mind made up. Sitting down, she placed her fingers on the keyboard, opening the critical files she had prepared long before this moment. She knew this was the time to act. She would not allow this violation to stay hidden in the shadows of luxurious boardrooms. Brian Walker, today would be his last day at this bank. She drafted an email to the headquarters of Prestige Bank, with a subject line simple yet heavy with meaning, request for immediate termination of Brian Walker's executive authority. She attached the documents and video evidence of Brian's discriminatory behavior evidence he could not deny. From that moment forward, Ariana would no longer stay silent. She would return and reclaim not only the control of the bank, but the values she had fought to protect her entire life. Ariana was not someone easily silenced. Throughout her long career at Prestige Bank, she had overcome countless challenges from subtle insults to fierce battles just to maintain her position of power. But today, she was not just a resilient CEO. She was someone standing up against a system riddled with deep-seated discrimination and division. And this battle, no matter how difficult, was one she could not back down from. She had spent hours preparing for this plan. Every step had been carefully calculated, and Ariana knew she was stepping into a no-holds-barred fight. Brian's betrayal, a man she had once trusted, was only a small reflection of the deeper discrimination rooted in society. But today, she would be the one to expose it all.
As Ariana sat in the meeting room with the senior directors of Prestige Bank, the light from the crystal chandeliers reflected in her eyes, making it impossible for anyone in the room to ignore the calm and power radiating from her.
On the table, documents filled with evidence were meticulously arranged, from audio recordings of Brian to live-stream videos that clearly showed the discrimination she had endured. The directors exchanged glances, the tension in the air rising with each passing second. They didn't dare speak, didn't dare do anything except sit still, their eyes fixed on Ariana. After all, she was the only one with the authority to decide the future of this branch. And when she made up her mind, everyone knew no one could stop her. Ariana set the documents down, picked up the pen on the table, and looked at the people across from her. "You're not here to debate whether I have the right to act or not. You're here to witness the change I'm about to bring. And I'm not just talking about firing a bank manager like Brian. This is a battle against the racism we've allowed to exist for far too long." She didn't raise her voice, and didn't need to shout. Every word she spoke carried the weight of a courtroom verdict. Her words echoed through the room, reaching into the hearts of those who had once thought racism was just part of the way the world worked. The room fell silent. No one dared move. You might think you can sit here and everything will pass like it always has, but I can't ignore it anymore. We have a system we've been too afraid to change for far too long, and now it's time to do something about it. Ariana continued, her voice steady but full of authority. The director's eyes slowly shifted from doubt to fear. Ariana's words were a declaration of war they could no longer deny. The atmosphere grew heavier with every breath. One director stood, beginning to speak, but Ariana raised her hand, cutting him off coldly. "There's no need for debate," she said. "The issue is clear. I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here to deliver justice." She opened the documents before them, starting to play the video that captured the conversation between Brian and the bank staff. Everyone in the room heard Brian's discriminatory words loud and clear, words dripping with contempt. She didn't need to explain further. The truth of his actions was undeniable. Another director spoke up, his voice weak. "Ariana, we can't act so hastily." Ariana smiled, her gaze sharp as ice. "Oh, then how long do you intend to wait until this kind of discrimination becomes an inseparable part of this bank's culture?" No one could answer. Ariana stood, pacing the room, her eyes unwavering. "You want me to make a change? Then here it is. Brian has become the villain, and everything he's done will have its consequences. And not just him. This entire system will change. Finally." One director rose, his head bowed, unable to meet her eyes. "We will do as you say." Ariana nodded. She didn't have time for further discussion. These people had seen the fairness and power in her words. They couldn't turn their backs on the truth she had just laid bare. "Then we'll start by removing Brian," she said. But she didn't stop there. "And after that, I'll launch a campaign to restructure the entire bank, not just staffing, but the workplace culture. All forms of discrimination must end immediately." The room sat in complete stillness. Ariana hadn't just laid out a bold plan, she had declared that she would take control of it all. But just as Ariana was preparing to leave, her phone rang. The caller ID showed no name. She answered without a word. "Just listening." A cold voice came through the line. "It will all end soon. You can't change anything." Ariana wasn't surprised to hear the cold voice on the other end of the line. She had prepared for this moment. But as the threat echoed in her ears, a chill still ran through her body. The voice wasn't from a stranger. She recognized it immediately. It was someone within the ranks of Prestige Bank, someone she had once trusted, but right now, all she could do was stay calm. They wanted her to back down. They wanted her to give up. But Ariana Cole wasn't that kind of person. "The end will come sooner than you think," Ariana replied, her voice fearless. "And I'll be the one to bring that end. Don't forget it." She hung up without hesitation, slid her phone into her pocket, and stood up. In that brief moment, she decided to take her plan even further. Everything began to move in exactly the direction she had hoped. And it wouldn't just be Brian who would fall. It would be the entire system he represented. The silence in the boardroom remained heavy. Ariana looked at her colleagues with piercing clarity. She knew they felt the shift, but they didn't yet fully grasp the seriousness of what was happening. She would make them understand. She wouldn't just change one bank, she would change how the entire global financial system operated. "Do you really think you can keep a system like this intact forever?" Ariana asked, her gaze unwavering. One director stood, flustered but not daring to object. "We'll cooperate with you." "Ariana, we just need more time to get everything in order." Ariana smiled softly, but there was no warmth in it. "Time is not something I can give you. If you want change, the time is now. We can't let people like Brian continue to threaten the future of this system." She turned and walked out of the boardroom with firm, confident steps, without the slightest hesitation. The entire board simply watched, none daring to stop her. They had witnessed Ariana's strength, and they knew she wasn't just a talented female CEO. She was someone who could do what no one else dared. Ariana stepped into her private office and closed the door behind her. She took a deep breath, then pulled out her phone. This time, she made a call, not to someone within the bank. This was a call to someone with major influence in the media. She had already planned what was going to happen next. "We need to make sure the public knows the truth. We're going to expose everything about Brian and this banking system. I want the recordings, the videos, all of it broadcast live," Ariana said, her voice steady. "No one can hide from the truth anymore." The call ended quickly, and Ariana immediately began preparing for the next step. She would expose Brian and everyone who had taken part in his scheme. These people couldn't hold on to their power forever. They would all have to pay. The next day, as Ariana got ready to leave, she received word from her lawyer. They were ready to file the lawsuit, and the evidence was fully compiled. Everything was in place to bring Brian down. But that was only the beginning. She didn't just want Brian to fall. She wanted to reclaim everything he had stolen from her, from those around her, and from society itself. Ariana stepped into her car, preparing for her next meeting. She knew nothing about this would be easy, but she also knew that if she didn't act now, this injustice would continue. She couldn't allow that to happen. Within just a few days, everything began to change. The videos of Brian's discrimination spread widely across social media. Civil rights organizations and black advocacy groups began speaking out in support of Ariana. Calls for reform of the financial system echoed everywhere. Ariana received support not only from her own community, but from people who had never paid attention to the issue before. But just as Ariana thought everything was finally under control, she received an unexpected call. This time, it was a voice she didn't recognize. She didn't let confusion take over, but the feeling that something was off still crept in. "You're on the right path," Ariana, but don't forget you're up against a force you can't easily defeat. The voice was deep, like a warning. Ariana stayed silent. Offering no reply, she knew she was standing at the edge of a battle far greater than she had imagined, but no matter what challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't give up. She had come too far, and she would fight to the end. They don't know who I am, Ariana whispered, her eyes full of determination. But they will. Everyone will. Ariana sat quietly in her car, the stranger's words still echoing in her mind. The tension was pressing down on her thoughts, but Ariana didn't let unease take over. She had faced much greater challenges before. This call, mysterious and full of threats, only made her more determined. Everything she had done, everything she had fought for, would not be undone by some vague warning. Ariana lifted her head, looking out through the car window. The streets of New York City were as crowded and noisy as ever, but to her, everything seemed to have changed. The road ahead wasn't just the route to her next meeting, it was the path she would walk to end discrimination, to bring Brian down, and to protect the values she had worked so hard to uphold all these years. When she arrived at her office, her entire legal team was already there, all prepared for battle. The documents, evidence, recordings, and videos of Brian's racist behavior had been carefully compiled. She had laid out a plan to bring this evidence into the light in the strongest way possible. Today would be the day when people wouldn't just hear about the injustice she had endured. It would be the day this banking system would have to face the consequences for the behavior it had allowed. "We can't slow down," Ariana said, her gaze sharp as ice. "Brian must pay, and we won't give him a chance to escape this punishment." One of the lawyers nodded. "Everything is ready. We'll hold a press conference right after we file the lawsuit. The evidence is clear, and we've detailed a plan to make sure justice is served." Ariana felt a strange calm as she heard these words. She knew this wasn't just about bringing Brian down. This was about change, about making sure people like him paid for what they had done to the innocent. She stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the city beneath her feet. Part of her wanted to stay quiet, to avoid all the watchful eyes within the bank. But another part of her wanted to move forward, to pull all the truth into the light, and she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. Just an hour later, Ariana stood before the cameras, facing the press and justice advocates. She began telling her story calmly, not rushed, not overly emotional, but every word she spoke carried weight and determination. Every sentence, every word reached the hearts of those listening. We cannot allow acts of prejudice and discrimination to persist in the world we are trying to build, Ariana said, her gaze steady and unblinking. Today, I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for everyone who has endured this injustice. The video of Brian's mistreatment of her played on the large screen behind her. The room was silent. No one dared speak. The images felt like a hard slap to the face of the financial system, to those who had enabled it. Ariana continued, "Brian Walker isn't just someone who deserves to be fired. He's a symbol of a system that has fed discrimination, and we can't let it exist a moment longer." When she finished her speech, she received a phone call. This time, it was from a number she hadn't expected. It was Brian. He had been hiding since everything collapsed, but now he had decided to call. He couldn't let this end so easily. "You think you've won?" Brian's voice came through the phone. "Do you really think you can change everything? You'll soon regret having taken this too far." The cold voice on the other end of the line echoed like a warning Ariana had sensed was coming. She wasn't surprised to receive the call, but the chill in that voice still made her shiver. The entire financial system you're up against, Ariana, isn't something that can be changed easily, and the people behind Brian will never let you win. That threatening feeling didn't shake Ariana. On the contrary, it only made her more determined. The warning didn't frighten her. It only confirmed that she was on the right path. If powers this strong wanted to take her down, then she knew exactly what she had to do. Ariana hung up and stared at the phone in her hand for a moment. This world wasn't easy to change, and she couldn't do it alone. But she had something these people didn't power, and she knew how to use it. The next morning, inside the sleek offices of a luxurious skyscraper, Ariana walked in with unwavering resolve. Every step she took was a declaration of what was about to happen. She had a detailed plan and showed no sign of slowing down. Reporters had already gathered, ready to witness the special event where she would expose everything that had happened at the bank and the secrets that had been buried for so long. All she needed was the chance to speak the truth. She stepped onto the platform, facing the crowd. the lights from the cameras highlighting every determined feature on her face. In the stillness of the hall, Ariana began her speech. We stand before a system that has fed racism for so many years, but today, I stand here to prove that change is possible. She paused, looking into the eyes of those around her. Brian Walker is not the only player in this game. He is part of a system we've endured for far too long. Ariana pulled back the curtain and displayed on the big screen the videos, evidence, and documents related to Brian and his discriminatory actions. The rejections she had faced, the words he thought would be brushed aside, were now the strongest, undeniable proof. The hall was silent, every eye fixed on her. Reporters focused, taking in every detail. We cannot continue living in a world where people like Brian can exist without punishment. Ariana continued, her voice strong but steady. Today, I'm not just here to demand justice for myself. I'm here to demand justice for everyone who has been denied opportunities simply because of the color of their skin. Everything began to shift. Not in an instant, but step by step. What Ariana was doing wasn't just a personal act. She was igniting a small revolution within the financial world, one where discrimination would no longer find shelter. Meanwhile, outside, Brian was panicking. He hadn't seen this coming. He thought that by treating her that way, he could win. But now, he realized he was facing ruin. Brian immediately reached out to influential figures within the bank, scrambling to salvage the situation, but just as he began preparing a plan to fight back, Ariana received an urgent call from a trusted member of her team. Ariana, I just got critical intel. Someone's working behind Brian's back and they're setting up a plan far bigger than his. Who? Ariana asked, her eyes lighting up. This wasn't just a battle against Brian. She was up against a force hidden in the shadows. Ariana clenched her fists, tension surging through every vein. The call from her trusted team member had revealed that everything was far bigger than she had imagined. Brian was only part of a much larger system she was fighting against, and now it seemed this battle was spreading wider than ever. She stood up, paced across her office, each step strong and decisive, as if she were preparing for a real war, although she had planned everything carefully from the start. The truth about the force behind Brian made her realize one thing: she wasn't facing just one enemy. She was facing an entire empire. We're not just fighting for justice, we're fighting for what's rightfully ours, Ariana whispered to herself, her voice unshaken. Every word she had spoken at the press conference earlier had planted a seed in the minds of those present. A seed that could never be silenced. But she knew that this was far from over. As she passed her desk, eyes fixed on the phone in her hand, she could feel the immense pressure. They were out there. The powerful were watching her every move. Ariana, everything is ready. Her trusted ally's voice came through the phone. I'm going to send you the details about the person behind Brian. This changes everything. No one could have predicted it would come to this. Although Ariana had exposed Brian's behavior, she couldn't ignore the greater threat that loomed. Brian might be dismissed, might have failed, but those behind him wouldn't be so easy to defeat. She needed to uncover the true puppeteer behind it all. Ariana, you need a new strategy, and I think the time has come for us to stop standing on the sidelines, the ally continued, his tone full of conviction. This person doesn't just have influence within this bank. They have a vast network and they're preparing to act. Ariana didn't reply immediately. Every piece of information she received pushed her deeper into tension. What she had done, what she was fighting for, wasn't just about one man. It was bigger than that, and she needed to think of a strategy to face this empire. Where do I begin? She asked, her eyes lighting up with determination. We won't do this alone. I'll reach out to people in the industry, people who can help and will stand by you, the ally said confidently. Ariana nodded, though no one could see her. She felt the strength of that support around her, but she also knew she had to act immediately. This bank wasn't just a workplace, it was the place where she could change an entire system. And now, she couldn't let anyone stand in her way. She set the phone down and walked toward the window. Bright sunlight poured into the room, and all she saw was a city filled with both opportunity and challenge. Deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. From this moment on, the battle wasn't just against Brian, it was against the larger powers quietly pulling the strings. When she returned to her desk, she opened her laptop and began sending the necessary messages. This was no time to slow down. Her plans were beginning to take clearer shape. Meetings with allies, investigations, and everything would continue. and those who stood behind Brian, hiding in the shadows, would soon have to face the truth. An hour later, as she sat back at her desk, Ariana's computer pinged with an urgent message from her legal team. She opened the email and saw a new piece of information she hadn't expected a name mentioned in recent documents. A name she never imagined would appear in this fight. One of the bank's highest-ranking executives. He wasn't just someone with power inside the bank. He was a figure with deep influence across the global financial world. Ariana clenched her fists tighter. Everything she thought she understood could change again. This man, the one behind it all, couldn't be allowed to remain in the shadows. Ariana stood waiting, her eyes fixed on the screen as news of the cyber attack spread like a storm. All of the bank's critical data was being breached, and immediately, she realized this wasn't just about Brian anymore. There was a greater force at play, someone dangerous hiding in the shadows, pulling the strings from afar. That man was Damian Blackwell, Global Chief Executive of the Global Finance Consortium, a financial giant whose influence reached far beyond anything she had ever imagined. He was someone who could manipulate key decisions across the global financial sector, a shadowy figure with tangled connections, someone no one dared confront directly. Damian Blackwell wasn't just a tycoon. He was the mastermind behind dark financial strategies, orchestrating underground operations and manipulating the world's largest markets. For a long time, he had seen Ariana as a potential threat and had waited for the right moment to strike. She had heard his name mentioned at major conferences, but she had never imagined he had such deep influence over the very system she worked within. A wave of tension rose in Ariana's chest. It wasn't Brian. It was Damian Blackwell, who she truly had to face. He was the name behind all the manipulation, all the schemes she couldn't yet see, in that moment. Ariana understood one thing: she couldn't just fight Brian. She had to face an empire of power and conspiracy led by Damian Blackwell, and this fight wouldn't be decided by a press conference or a legal strategy. It would be a strategic war, a battle between people capable of manipulating entire financial systems. And Ariana wouldn't stop until she brought him down. But just as she realized what was happening, her phone rang, a call from an unknown number. Without hesitation, Ariana answered. "We know everything about you. Ariana." "And Damian Blackwell does not forgive those who stand in his way," the cold voice said, then hung up. Ariana stood still, her hand gripping the phone tightly. The stranger's warning on the other end of the line wasn't just an ordinary threat. Damian Blackwell, the name she had only just learned in these past few tense moments, had now become the most dangerous enemy she would ever face. He wasn't just a powerful figure in finance. He was the one who had hidden behind the dark schemes all along. The chill from that call hadn't left her. People like Damian weren't easily defeated. Ariana knew that he didn't just want to bring down Brian. His real goal was to stop her, to stop everything she was building, with the phone still in her hand. Ariana turned back to her desk. She couldn't let fear or worry take hold of her. Everything was clear now. Damian Blackwell wasn't just another player behind Brian's actions. He was the mastermind who had orchestrated it all. And she, with all the power she had, couldn't allow him to keep controlling everything. She reopened her email, searching for anything she could find about Damian. All she had at that moment was a name, a high-ranking title, and a powerful financial organization, the Global Finance Consortium. Damian's connections with major corporations, politicians, and power brokers across the world weren't things she could afford to ignore. "We have to find his weakness," Ariana whispered, her eyes lighting up with determination. "He can't be allowed to control it all." She started calling her allies in the industry, those she knew could help in this battle. One of the first people she needed to reach was Victor Hayes, a well-known financial expert in the field. Victor had been Ariana's partner in many major projects, and she knew he held valuable information about people behind giant financial systems like the Global Finance Consortium. Without hesitation, she dialed Victor's number. He was the only one she could fully trust right now. "Victor, I need your help," Ariana began as the call connected. "I need every bit of information you have on Damian Blackwell and the Global Finance Consortium." Victor heard the seriousness in her voice. So, unlike their usual conversations, he paused for a moment, as if to confirm she was truly asking what he thought she was. "You're dealing with someone incredibly dangerous." "Ariana," Victor said, his voice grave. "Damian isn't just a finance guy. He's built an enormous network. What he's done goes far beyond market manipulation. He can influence major decisions from the shadows. Ariana couldn't deny it. She already sensed Damien's danger. But Victor's warning made everything even clearer. "You know I'll help you," Victor continued. "But we have to move carefully. He doesn't show his weak spots." "Exactly," Ariana replied, her gaze sharp as a blade. "And I won't stop until I bring him down." After that call, Ariana no longer felt anxious. She had the information she needed and a clearer path forward. This was no longer just about what had happened at the bank or with Brian. She was facing a battle of finance and power that she would have to win with every ounce of strength she had. Damien Blackwell wouldn't keep manipulating everything, and she would be the one to end it. The next day, Ariana set out to organize a meeting with every influential figure in the industry. She needed to prove she wasn't just a talented female CEO. She was someone capable of changing a system that had lasted far too long. But as she prepared for this meeting, she received an unexpected message. "I don't think you'll escape this fight so easily." Ariana. It came from an unfamiliar number, another reminder of the danger she faced. Ariana stared at the message, her hands tightening, but just as she finished reading it, her phone lit up again. This time, it was an email from a secret source. "Damien Blackwell has a critical meeting tonight. This is your only chance." And another challenging battle awaited her. Ariana felt a slight chill as she finished reading the message. This wasn't the first time she had received threats, but this time was different. This time, things had gone further. It wasn't just a fight against Brian anymore. It was a fight against Damien Blackwell, a financial monster for whom nothing was impossible. And now, he was one step closer than ever before. She already knew Damien was cunning and devious, but as this new information reached her, the truth seemed to come into full view. Damien Blackwell wasn't someone who could be taken down easily. To him, Ariana was a serious threat, and he wouldn't stop until everything she had built was destroyed. "Damien has a critical meeting tonight. This is your only chance." Ariana couldn't stop thinking about this opportunity. She didn't have much time left, and if this was the only chance to bring Damien down, she had to be ready. She knew that even one wrong move could cost her everything. But if she didn't act now, the opportunity would slip away. She took a deep breath, thinking carefully about her next step. This information could be the spark that ignited a major confrontation. She wouldn't let Damien Blackwell keep manipulating the financial markets and consolidating power. She wouldn't stop. Ariana decided to contact her team immediately. "I need all of you to be ready right now. We have one chance to go up against Damien. I'll need you tracking every move." An emergency meeting was held that same morning. Ariana shared everything she had just learned about Damien's meeting. This would be the opportunity to strike directly at the heart of his power. Everything had to be prepared down to the last detail. She couldn't overlook a single thing. Inside the meeting room, everyone understood the gravity of the situation. Each member of her team knew that what lay ahead would change not just their careers, but the entire global financial system. Ariana sat there, her eyes cold, her mind carefully calculating every move. "We won't let him escape. I want a detailed plan to infiltrate that meeting, to uncover everything Damien is hiding," Ariana said, her voice sharp as a blade. "He thinks he can get rid of me easily. I'll prove him wrong." One team member spoke up. "Ariana, we'll need external support to track his movements. Remember, he's not someone we can confront head-on. We'll need specialized strategies to gather intel." Ariana nodded. "Exactly. We can't act recklessly. Everything must be handled discreetly. Let me do what I do best. You focus on supporting me where I need it." The meeting ended after more than an hour, and immediately, Ariana began preparing for this confrontation. She no longer felt fear or worry. She had faced countless difficulties and challenges in her career, but this time was different. This was the decisive battle, a battle she had to win. As night fell, Ariana prepared to step into the meeting she had been waiting for. She changed into a black dress, elegant, professional, but not flashy. She knew she couldn't let Damien sense the danger she posed right away. This was her chance to approach him quietly, gather the information she needed, and then deliver a crushing blow. She got into the car, sitting silently as she stared out the window. The city of New York buzzed with life, the city lights reflecting on the glass. She could feel the tension in the air, but at the same time, confidence swelled inside her. The meeting would be a crucial chance to uncover the truth. Ariana wouldn't let Damien continue holding the upper hand so easily. He would have to pay for what he had done, not just to her, but to the entire system he had manipulated. When Ariana arrived at the location, she received a mysterious text from an unknown number. "We're watching him. You can't trust anyone at tonight's meeting." The message made her heart tighten. She had prepared herself to face Damien, but now, a new truth she hadn't expected emerged. Someone was watching her, and she would have to decide quickly whether she could trust those she was working with. Ariana stepped out of the conference room, her heart still pounding, but this time, not out of fear. It was fury that surged through her veins, fury that had reached its peak. What she had just witnessed wasn't just personal discrimination. It was a system that had existed for far too long, suffocating the rights and opportunities of so many people simply because of the color of their skin. And today, she would be the one to call it out. Throughout her fight, Ariana had seen too many people like her, people who had been marginalized, deemed unworthy, denied opportunities simply because of racial differences. But her anger didn't stop with herself. She understood that racism wasn't just a personal battle. It was a systemic issue that had to be dismantled. As she entered her office, a powerful sense of determination rose within her. The evidence she had gathered wouldn't just bring down Damien Blackwell and people like him. She would expose the racism that had been hidden for too long within the financial sector. The people who had manipulated opportunities and stolen them away from so many simply because of their race. "This isn't just about me," Ariana whispered, her eyes glowing with resolve. "This is about everyone who's been cast aside because they didn't look like everyone else. It's time we call out this injustice." She began a meeting with her legal and communications teams. The information she had just collected wouldn't stop at accusing Brian or Damien. She wanted to wake up the entire financial industry and make them see that racism didn't just exist in individual actions, but as part of a system, from boardroom decisions down to how banks and financial institutions treated their clients. "We're not just presenting these documents and recordings to prove Brian or Damien were wrong," Ariana said, her voice strong. "We need to make everyone understand this isn't just about bad individuals. It's about a system that's tolerated racism for far too long. We'll show the world no one can keep enabling these actions anymore." Her team agreed, and the meeting quickly shifted to action plans. Ariana decided everything would go public immediately. She would hold a special press conference, not just to expose Damien and his deeds, but to condemn the entire financial system that had created unequal opportunities for people of color. The next day, as Ariana stood before the crowd at the press conference, she felt the tension in the room. But this time, she wasn't anxious. Everything she was about to say was the truth, and she believed in it. "We can't keep living in a world where people like Brian and Damien can manipulate and divide our society," Ariana began, her voice filled with strength and resolve. "Racism isn't just about harsh words or impulsive actions. It's a system, a foundation that we must tear down now." She went on to speak about the stories she and others like her had experienced, the stories that had stayed hidden in the dark, the victims of discrimination pushed out and denied chances simply because of their skin color. She mentioned the times she had been unjustly turned away in financial dealings, the times she'd been treated poorly in meetings, and she named Brian and Damien, men who had used their power to uphold an unfair system. Today, we're not just talking about a few individuals' mistakes, we're calling out a system that has hurt so many, that has denied so many opportunities because they look different. "This is about justice," Ariana said, her voice carrying weight. "It's time for everyone to see that racism no longer has a place in this society." Her words rang through the room, not just as an accusation, but as a call to action. The people present couldn't sit still. They began to see more clearly the injustice that had lasted too long. And they realized this was their chance to change it. As the press conference ended, Ariana received a call from an unfamiliar number. On the other end was the voice of a bank employee, and his words made Ariana's heart tighten. "We just got word that Damien is trying to pull out of this game, but he won't go alone. He has allies everywhere." Ariana felt the danger in that warning. The battle wouldn't end with Damien. The discrimination, the people behind these dark decisions? There were many, and she would have to face them all. Ariana didn't let worry take hold of her, but the call she'd just received made her feel the urgency of this fight. Damien might have been preparing to retreat, but he wasn't alone. The forces hidden behind him were watching her every move, and she knew this confrontation wasn't just about Brian, or even about Damien. It was about an entire global financial system she had to face. She rose from her desk, tension rising in her chest. She couldn't stop. Every step she took was a declaration of war against those in power. The crowd at yesterday's press conference wasn't just curious onlookers. They were people who could help her change the entire system if she could make them believe in the truth she was fighting to expose. But she also knew that continuing down this path wouldn't be easy. Damien and his allies weren't going to be defeated easily. They had power, wealth, and influence that stretched far and wide. But Ariana had something they didn't: unwavering resolve and a clear goal. She had come too far to stop now. As Ariana considered her next steps, breaking news flashed across her computer screen. The entire financial world was abuzz about an important meeting of top financial executives, and none other than Damien Blackwell was at the center of it. This would be her chance to confront him directly, to unearth what he had been so desperate to keep hidden. Ariana knew that if she wanted to bring down Damien and the forces behind him, she had to strike at the root of the problem, and this meeting, dangerous as it was, would be the first step toward dismantling everything they had built over so many years. She wouldn't let herself be defeated. She prepared for a direct confrontation. This wouldn't be an ordinary encounter. This was the chance to expose it all, to bring Damien's schemes and those of his backers into the light. On the day of the meeting, Ariana arrived at the venue, a high-rise building in the heart of New York's financial district. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but she knew beneath this calm exterior was a battle between those in power and those determined to change the system. As she entered the conference room, her eyes locked onto Damien sitting at the head of the table. The others were deep in discussion about financial matters, oblivious to Ariana's presence. He sat there, cold and smug. But this time, Ariana wouldn't let him control the game. She walked up to the large table without hesitation. "Damien," she said firmly, "at last, we meet." Damien looked up, his eyes cold but unable to hide his surprise. He hadn't expected her to approach him like this. So direct, so powerful. "Ariana, I knew you wouldn't back down," he said, a hint of disdain in his voice. "But you can't do anything. We're talking about a financial empire. You could fight your whole life and never win." Ariana stared at him down, unmoved. "We'll see who wins." "Damien," she said, "the system you uphold will fall, and I'll be the one to bring it down." The room fell silent. No one dared speak. The other executives began to realize this was no ordinary meeting. Ariana hadn't come to sit quietly and listen. She had come to confront and demand justice. Damien could no longer keep his cold facade. He stood, his eyes burning with anger. "You think you can overthrow me? Do you really think these documents alone can topple an empire? You can't change anything." Ariana didn't let his fury distract her. She stepped closer. "Fearless, your system can't stand any longer. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how many allies you have, in the end, the truth will prevail, and you will pay the price." She laid a file out in front of him, not just evidence on Brian, but secrets Damien had thought buried. Documents that would expose everything. She had planned every step, and now it was time to bring his darkest secrets into the light. Damien looked down at the file, his anger fading into something else: unease. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, his voice starting to waver. "You don't understand what will happen if you keep playing this game." Ariana didn't respond. She stood there, eyes burning with determination. She had come too far to stop now, no matter what Damien said, no matter how he threatened. Ariana would not back down. The entire room seemed to sink into a tense silence, broken only by the sound of people breathing. Ariana didn't take her eyes off Damien. His threats couldn't make her waver, if anything. They only fueled her determination. Every plan had been carefully laid out, and now was the time to take the final step. Damien Blackwell stood frozen, his gaze no longer filled with arrogance. Instead, there was confusion, a feeling he had never known. He had always controlled everything in his life, but today, he was facing someone he couldn't manipulate. Ariana was an unpredictable force, an adversary like none he'd ever encountered. Ariana said nothing, simply observing him calmly. She knew he was shaken, but he still hadn't realized the truth: the game had changed. And this time, no one could save him. "You think these documents can take me down?" Damien spoke at last, but there was a weakness in his voice, as if he were grasping for a way out of the trap he himself had created. Ariana shook her head gently. It's not just the evidence. Damien, this is a change you can't stop. The system won't survive without you propping it up. But today, you will pay the price. She paused, letting her words sink in. Everyone in the room felt the shift in the air. They no longer saw Damien's dominance and power. Instead, what they saw was fear. Something they never imagined they'd witness in him. You won't win. Ariana, it's impossible. You're just a CEO with nothing more than a bit of temporary power. You really think you can change an entire system with a few pieces of evidence, Damien growled, but the pride in his voice had lost much of its confidence. Ariana smiled, but there was no humor in that smile. You're right. I'm not just changing the system. I'm going to make sure everyone sees that racism has no place in this society. People like you won't be allowed to keep manipulating everything. Damien could no longer respond to her words. He stood there, his gaze shifting into bewilderment. Those around him glanced at one another, and Ariana knew they could no longer support Damien. Everything was crumbling around him. Ariana stepped closer, fearless. So, Damien, get ready. You'll see that I'm not so easy to defeat, and I won't stop until everything you've built falls apart. She turned and walked out of the conference room without looking back, leaving Damien and the executives behind to face a truth they could no longer deny. She knew this was just the beginning of the fight, but Ariana was certain she wouldn't stop until it was resolved, not just for justice for herself, but for everyone who had been pushed aside because of racism. As Ariana entered the elevator, she received a text, this time from an unknown number, but the words in the message made her pause. Damien isn't the only one. He has dangerous allies in the shadows. You're facing a force much greater. A chill ran down her spine. She couldn't let worry take hold. No matter how powerful these forces were, they wouldn't stop her. But Ariana knew that if she wanted to end this fight, she would have to move even more carefully. Damien might have been part of the system she was up against, but those behind him were the real target. As Ariana left the building, she realized it wasn't just the financial system. Greater powers were quietly manipulating everything. A full-scale battle was about to begin. And this time, Ariana wouldn't be fighting just for herself. She would fight for all those left in the shadows of discrimination. Ariana stood before the mirror, gazing at her own reflection. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her black suit sharp and precise. But it was her eyes that told the real story. Eyes filled with resolve. So different from the smugness she'd always seen in Damien Blackwell. He and men like him had always believed that wealth and power would shield them from everything, but they were wrong. Today, Ariana was walking into a critical meeting. This wasn't about dealing with someone small like Brian anymore. Her target was the entire system. But this time, she wasn't coming to negotiate. She was here to shatter the rot clinging to power, to bring down a financial empire that had long fostered racial discrimination. As she entered the conference room, the directors of Global Finance Consortium were already waiting. Damien sat at the head of the table, his face as cold as ever. But this time, Ariana felt no fear. She knew she was standing on a battlefield far larger than before. The tension in the air was thick. She could feel it in every glance, every silence. What more is there to say about what's happened? Ariana began, her voice firm and direct. She didn't have time to clarify everything. I've presented evidence that can't be denied. Your secrets have been exposed. Damien didn't answer right away, but the arrogance in his eyes was slowly giving way to concern. Ariana was on the right path. He had thought he could escape this trap, but now he saw there was no way to hide the truth. You think a few documents can bring me down? Damien finally spoke, but his voice no longer held the strength it once had. Ariana smiled, a smile free of pity. That's right, and these documents won't just bring you down. They'll bring down the entire system you protect. We're not just fighting to deal with Brian or with you. We're fighting for a fairer world. She didn't need to do anything more. The directors around the table exchanged glances, none daring to speak. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. Ariana's words had sunk deep, and they were starting to realize everything had changed. They weren't the ones holding all the power anymore. Damien refused to admit defeat. He rose, his face pale. You can't change everything just because of a few pieces of evidence, he said. Though his voice had clearly weakened, Ariana rose too, stepping closer to him. She didn't need to do anything else to make him see the truth. He had already lost. It's not just about evidence. Damien, this is about a system that's been built for too long on lies and racial discrimination. There's no place left for people like you. As Damien opened his mouth to respond, Ariana's phone suddenly vibrated. This time, it was a message from an unknown source, and as soon as she read it, a fresh wave of tension washed over her. Damien is preparing to retreat. But he won't go alone. He's planning to take other powerful figures with him. Be careful. Ariana's confrontation with Damien wasn't over. Though he had been forced to step down from his position at Global Finance Consortium, the people behind him, his secret allies, still held immense power. None of them would let Ariana go so easily. After the meeting, Ariana returned to her office, but she couldn't shake the thoughts of what was to come. She had defeated Damien, but she knew the battle had more than one front. People like Damien weren't easily brought down by a few documents or investigations. They had power, influence, and the capacity to do the worst. The next day, Ariana decided to keep going. She called her legal team and began pushing everything into the light. She had prepared for this fight for a long time, and now was the time to fully take down the forces that had manipulated her and people like her. This isn't just about us. It's not just about Brian or Damien, Ariana told her team. This is about everyone who's ever been pushed aside because of their skin color, their background, because of racism. We're going to create a turning point, a change no one can deny. She began working with media partners to expose the secrets of those behind the Global Finance Consortium, documents detailing illegal activities, the shady manipulations behind financial decisions. All of it would be made public. A week later, with everything prepared, Ariana stood before a crowd facing reporters, financial experts, and members of the community. She had made history, but she knew her journey had only just begun. Today. I stand here to prove that racism no longer has a place in this society, Ariana began, her voice strong and resolute. We will not stop until everyone like Damien Blackwell is held accountable. And as the crowd erupted in applause, Ariana knew this victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever fought for justice. She hadn't just broken a financial empire, she had changed an entire system.